On the morning of December 1, 2024, in a small liquor store at the corner of Main Street and 3rd Avenue, an unusual incident occurred that left the whole neighborhood in shock. A woman, dirty and with an expression full of rage, entered the store with no intention at shopping. Instead, she grabbed a bottle of red wine before running out, but the situation didn't end there. She didn't just leave quickly, she created a chaotic scene by throwing the bottle of wine into the store's glass window, forcing everyone in the area to stop and witness an unbelievable spectacle. The police immediately arrived, but the situation grew even stranger when she denied all accusations and displayed a frustrated, defiant attitude. She didn't just rush away, she had a vengeful plan to punish the store. In her fury, she gripped the stolen bottle of red wine as though it was her tool for expressing intense frustration. Instead of quietly leaving, she decided to turn the incident into a chaotic scene. With a swift yet decisive motion, she hurled the bottle at the store's glass window, and immediately, the space became eerily silent, as if time itself had stopped. The sound of the glass shattering spread, sharp as an unforgettable warning, causing everyone nearby to jump and halt, their eyes unable to look away from the bizarre scene. The glass shattered into shards, the bright light reflecting off the broken pieces, making everything around seem sharp and threatening. At the same time, the red wine splattered, the deep red drops resembling streaks of blood, spreading across the pavement, creating a scene both desolate and tense. It wasn't just the glass breaking, it was the shattering of the peace that once existed in the neighborhood, as her anger became an event that no one could ignore. The tension enveloped the space, as though all the witnesses could feel her loss of control, and an unpredictable instability was escalating. When the police arrived, they didn't just find the remains of the broken wine bottle, but also witnessed the woman being arrested. However, instead of expressing remorse, she began to vehemently deny all accusations. "Who says I stole the bottle of wine? Wine. I've never seen any wine bottle," she yelled, waving her hands as if she were in a speed-talking contest. Throughout the checkup process, the woman's behavior grew increasingly bizarre and confusing, leaving everyone present at the scene in disbelief. When the police asked her to explain what happened at the store, instead of providing a clear and reasonable answer, she suddenly shifted topics. Every question from the police was deflected as she rambled on about irrelevant matters. She began telling stories about reading the newspaper to her grandparents, with details that made it sound like it was an extremely important and serious act, even though it had no bearing on the current situation. Not stopping there, she continued to complain about trivial personal issues that seemed utterly meaningless in such a tense context. She talked about not being able to find her favorite toothpaste, as if that was the most important thing at the moment. Her words drifted aimlessly, as though she were living in an alternate reality, where petty problems dominated all attention. She even regarded not finding toothpaste as the main cause of the broken glass window, an illogical yet metaphorical justification for her inability to face reality. This bizarre attitude further highlighted her lack of understanding of the situation at hand. Instead of realizing the seriousness of her actions, stealing a bottle of wine and destroying someone else's property, she clung to nonsensical stories about her personal life. These stories not only heightened the discomfort of those around her but also conveyed a thought-provoking lesson. Sometimes, people avoid a responsibility and the truth by diving into seemingly harmless tales, which inadvertently make the situation more complicated and difficult to understand than ever before. Actually, I just wanted to find a quiet spot to read the newspaper to my grandparents, not destroy the store. She continued to justify herself, her voice full of pride, as if she had just discovered some great truth the world needed to hear. Her eyes sparkled with determination, as if by saying this, everyone would stop and applaud her. The police stood frozen, unsure of how to react to such an absurd and humorously strange defense. "The glass just happened to break. What's the big deal?" she continued, waving her hand as though explaining a complex philosophical issue. Faced with her illogical story, the officers couldn't help but feel perplexed, with some exchanging doubtful and confused glances. In situations like this, they sometimes had to decide whether to smile and treat it as a joke or continue the serious investigation. They had heard ridiculous excuses before, absurd justifications that no one could easily believe, such as "I was just testing the durability of the window," or "the wine was part of a study on glass resilience." But this time, the woman had truly left them speechless. Not only did she deny her actions, But she also offered an explanation that was completely out of the ordinary. She insisted that the broken glass incident was natural, like a physical phenomenon that no one could foresee. Her tone sounded as though she were lecturing on a scientific experiment, her gaze confident and unconcerned about the possibility of being arrested. As the officers tried to decipher whether she was joking or truly believed in her theory, they realized something. This wasn't the first time they had encountered outlandish excuses, but they had never faced a natural glass breakage scenario like this. She was trying to turn an act of vandalism into part of a natural science experiment, a trial that anyone could join without facing consequences, just because she believed that glass could break on its own without any external intervention. The officers' surprise and confusion only deepened when they realized she wasn't just attempting to evade responsibility, it seemed to be challenging their logic and patience. Perhaps for her, it was nothing serious, just a harmless joke, but for the officers, it was a puzzle they had never encountered in their entire investigative careers. This situation wasn't just a test of investigation, but also a trial of the officers' ability to remain calm when faced with someone who clearly had no awareness of their actions. The scene the woman created wasn't just a confrontation between a perpetrator and law enforcement. It was an event reflecting the conflict between reality and justification. It prompted a question. Did she truly believe in her own defense, or was she just trying to make her wrongdoing seem logical to others? This opened up an interesting thought about human nature, especially in tense situations where an individual might choose to stand firm in defiance, even knowing their actions were wrong. This woman wasn't simply denying her guilt. She was putting on a dramatic performance, as if participating in a play. Every word she spoke, every gesture, seemed meticulously crafted, like an actress playing a lead role in a bizarre comedy. She stood firm in her rage, attempting to convince not only the police but herself as well that she was entirely innocent, despite the clear and undeniable evidence. While this image was somewhat comical, it also contained a surprising insight into the power of self-belief, even if that belief was completely misguided. What truly astonished the police, and perhaps any witnesses, was her boundless creativity in justifying her actions. Not everyone had the ability to craft a compelling story that made others stop and think, even though all the events unfolding before them directly contradicted her story. Her imagination stretched far beyond the boundaries of conventional logic, turning a simple criminal act into a verbal sparring match full of sharp, intricate words. This is what made this situation so strangely captivating. It wasn't just a confrontation between crime and law, but also a battle between reason and blind faith, between truth and absurd justifications. With every new statement, she seemed to reaffirm that, in her world, everything could be explained in her own, unique way. Her words weren't just excuses, they were an assertion of her absolute confidence in her reasoning, no matter how logical it seemed. The glass broke. How would I know? Maybe the glass just broke on its own. At first, this might seem like a naive defense, but in her mind, it was a convincing argument, as if everything in the world could happen without human intervention. She continued to speak nonchalantly, as if everything was part of the cosmic cycle, as though the glass breaking wasn't due to her actions, but was just an unavoidable accident. For her, nothing was beyond explanation, and everything was a series of events controlled by the universe, rather than by deliberate actions. This calmness wasn't just in her words, but also in her attitude. There was no fear or worrying in the face of the officers, who were trying to get to the truth amidst the chaos. Despite hearing her inspiring and remarkably creative justifications, the police could only stand there in silence, unsure of how to respond. They realized they couldn't confront someone who could craft such convincing stories, even if they lacked any real basis. They were confused not because of a lack of evidence, but because this woman, with her cunning, had created a world where all the rules could be broken and every situation could be explained in her own chosen way. From this story, the important lesson we can draw is that when confronted with undeniable facts, some people will stubbornly refuse to accept responsibility and create absurd justifications. They craft arguments that, while seemingly ridiculous, are incredibly persuasive within their own distorted worldview. A world where the truth is twisted and everything can be explained on their own terms. This is a common psychological defense mechanism where people, unable to accept their mistakes, will do anything to avoid responsibility. The cost of this behavior is the ongoing contradiction in their words and actions, as they continue to believe in their own justifications, despite clear evidence to the contrary. The scene describing the woman being arrested and facing the police is a clear example of denying reality. When she was put in the police car, instead of accepting the fact that her actions had caused chaos, she continued to complain and express irrational anger. "What's this? Are you arresting me again? It's just the glass. I didn't do anything. I'll sue you." Her words were not only excuses, but also full of defiance, as if she were participating in a legal battle rather than accepting her violation of the law. This statement wasn't just an act of non-cooperation. It reflected a strong opposition, a behavior that many people in similar situations would easily recognize. She wasn't just justifying her actions, she was also blaming the surrounding objects, in this case, the glass door, as though it was the true culprit. Her shout, full of indignation and delusions of power, as if facing a group of paparazzi, showed the contradiction in her actions. She had no awareness that she was the subject of an investigation, yet she acted as if she were the victim in an invisible war. This reflects a part of human nature, a part that struggles to accept mistakes and always tries to defend its own ego, regardless of whether there is any reasonable justification. When someone is too accustomed to blaming their circumstances or others, admitting fault becomes increasingly difficult and painful. Even after being arrested and taken to the detention center, this woman not only maintained her steadfast attitude, but also showed stubbornness and refusal to accept any truth. Rather than feeling remorse or cooperating with the authorities, she continued to deny her actions, from stealing the bottle of wine to throwing it at the glass door. This attitude not only confused the officers, but also made the situation even more complicated. She continuously interrupted the investigation process, persistently inserting unconvincing justifications into the interrogations. Her statement, "Don't think I don't know the law. I learned it from a small book I read, and I've never done anything wrong," not only reflects a lack of understanding about legal processes, but also reveals her arrogance in facing the situation. She seemed to believe that by merely reading through a small book, she could grasp all the nuances of the law and use it as a shield to justify her actions. In reality, the situation proved that a little bit of incomplete knowledge and a stubborn refusal to accept responsibility only complicated things further, offering no help to herself, but instead making everything more tangled. In this way, this woman embodied a model of self-satisfaction and obstinacy, where her reasoning was not only flawed but also lacked any practical basis. No matter how hard she tried, the truth remained the truth, and her continuous opposition and refusal to take responsibility only harmed herself. She clearly didn't realize that her attitude and actions not only wasted the authorities' time, but could also lead to more severe consequences during the investigation process. In the end, after a long standoff with the police and continuing to deny all her actions, the woman was arrested and taken to the station. Despite her constant shouting and complaining, her actions were as clear as daylight. This incident was not only a lesson in lack of self-control and responsibility, but also showed that frustration and a defiant attitude don't resolve issues, but only make the situation more complicated. We may all face stressful situations, but staying calm and approaching the problem logically is always the wiser choice. The lesson learned is, actions can solve problems, but attitude can make everything worse, and sometimes, it's better to do the right thing than to try to prove you are right.